Hi, I'm Gus Abraham, a digital art nerd, and I would love to help you breathe 3D. I welcome you to this fresh start in 3D modeling with special focus on products. I've crafted this series in a way that blends some fundamentals and theories with practicals that will help you first be competent in some basic areas, then also give you the foundation to help you explore the broad world of 3D design. Now, if you're currently watching this video, it means you have chosen Blender as your preferred software. If this is not the case, please ensure that you check the other video on the channel, as that's made for cinema for the users. Also, ensure you join the Telegram group for more conversations, more updates, and more growth opportunities. Before we begin, there are several ways you can support the series and the channel at large. First, you can kindly subscribe to the channel to get more classes and to get notified for subsequent series, and then you can also grab the Fresh Start bundle of clay image references. It consists of over 25 clay product references to help you practice and model more products after you take part in this training. You can get this bundle from the link attached in the description below, and it just goes for $5. Also, if you're into NFTs, you can patronize my Voguebot NFT project on OpenSea. It's a high-on-style 3D fashion NFT project that has a crazy utility where I create a free animated fashion NFT for every piece sold. There are just 568 items, so you can get in early now. "3D design has to do with creating a three-dimensional object or space using a computer modeling software. In simple terms, a 3D object or space is one where you can assess the depth or perspective of such space or object. In contrast to a two-dimensional object that just has two axes, which you may know as length and breadth, examples of two-dimensional objects are squares, rectangles, or circles. However, a 3D object is represented by three dimensions, which are X, Y, and Z axis. In 3D design, there are multiple workflows, pipelines, or stages that you go through to produce your final output. These pipelines vary based on the project you're working on, but there are 5 fundamental pipelines that you will usually go through in the life cycle of a project. The first is modeling or sculpting, which has to do with building or constructing your object. The second is material creation, shading, or texturing, which has to do with the look and feel of your object and element in your scene. The third is animation, which has to do with applying motion to elements in your scene. The fourth is lighting, which has to do with adding different light types, settings, and effects to your scene. And the fifth is rendering, which has to do with viewing and exporting the processed version of your project. But for the purpose of this tutorial, we'll focus majorly on modeling, but we'll also touch on the other areas I highlighted earlier. Now for this training, the software we'll be using is Blender 3.1. So let's go over its interface. Once you load Blender, this is the interface you will meet. Before we do anything here, hit A on your keyboard to select all the objects and then hit delete to delete them. So over here we have our 3D viewport, and this is where you can find your objects, lights, materials, and other tools or elements in our scene. We can also refer to this as our workspace. Over here we have our outliner, where we can find a list of our objects and tools in our scene. And over here we have our property panel, where we can find the properties and attributes of our objects, our workspace, and then other tools in our scene. So before we go ahead, let's quickly add an object to our scene. So you can go over here to add, and then under mesh you can select any object here, or you can hit Shift A on your keyboard, and under mesh you can select any object. So I'll select this monkey over here. So now you can see the monkey has shown in our outliner. And if I come over here to object properties, you can see the properties of this monkey. So if you look over here, we have different menus, and then here we can select several tools and also perform some actions in our scene. So you can click on any of these menus to expand it and then view the options under it. So here under select, you find different ways to select our object. Under file here, we can save and then import or export objects from our scene. So over here, we have some tools that vary based on the mode we are in. So currently we're in our object mode here. If I click this and switch to our edit mode, you see that we have more tools added to this panel here. So our object mode is where we can perform actions on the entire object. Our edit mode is where we can access the vertices, the edges, and the faces of this object. We can switch to our edge mode here, and then we can also switch to our face mode here. So to switch in and out of your edit and object mode, you can hit tab on your keyboard. So let's go over navigation. So to rotate around the object in our scene, you can click and hold your middle mouse button down, and then you just move your mouse around this way. To move the view, you can go over here to this icon, left click, and then hold it to move the view this way. To zoom in and out, you can either scroll your mouse wheel in and out to zoom. Then you can either go over to this icon, left click and hold it down, then move your mouse to zoom in and out. Now to move, scale or rotate our object, we can either use the tools here or we can use some keyboard shortcuts. So you can activate the move tool here, and then when you select your object, this gizmo will show up. So you can move the object on any of these axes. I'm currently moving it on the Z axis. You can move it on the X axis, or you can move it on the Y axis. You can also hit G on your keyboard and you can just grab this object and move it around this way. If you want to move the object on a particular axis, after you hit G, you can then click on the axis. So now I can click on the Y axis and it will move that object only on the Y axis. If I left click to drop this and I hit G and Z, it will move the object only on the Z axis. To rotate my object, I can either go to my rotate tool to bring my gizmo up this way, and then I can left click on any of the axes to rotate it, or I can hit R on my keyboard to just rotate my object this way, and then I can hit R on a particular axis to rotate the object on that particular axis. So now I'm rotating the object on the Y axis. So if I also hit R and X, it will rotate the object on the X axis. To scale my object, I can go over here to my scale tool, and I can also scale this object on a particular axis, or I can scale this object uniformly by clicking on this circle here. It will just scale the entire object uniformly. Or I can use my keyboard shortcut by hitting S, and then it will scale this object. And if I click a particular axis, let's click Z, it will scale this object only on the Z axis. Same applies to other axes. So if you hit S and Y, it will scale your object only on the Y axis. To undo and redo actions that you perform in your scene, you can hit Ctrl Z to undo actions, and you can hit Ctrl Shift Z to redo those actions. We can also switch to different viewport cameras. Currently we're in our user perspective camera. We can also switch to some flat or orthographic angles. So we can either do that by coming to this axis here, and if you left click on the Z axis now, it will change it to our top orthographic view. To go out of this view, you can just rotate out of it with your middle mouse button. And if you don't want to use the icons here, you can use the numpad on your keyboard. So if you hit 7 on your numpad, it will take you to your top orthographic view. If you hit 1 on your numpad, it will take you to your front orthographic view. If you hit 3 on your numpad, it will take you to your right orthographic view. If you want to reverse these views, say you want to change right to left, top to bottom, or front to back, hit Ctrl before you hit any of these numbers. So if I hit Ctrl 7 on my numpad, it will take me to my bottom orthographic view. If I hit Ctrl 1 on my numpad, it will take me to my back orthographic view. And if I hit Ctrl 3 on my numpad, it will take me to my left orthographic view. And if I want to go out of this view at any point in time, I can either hit 5 on my numpad, or I can rotate out of that view. So before we go into modeling proper, let's rehearse some modeling tools and functions that will often repeat in this tutorial. So I'll use this object for demonstration. The first key thing to note is that this object is made up of points, edges, and faces. And to see these points, edges, and faces, we need to switch the mode here from object mode to edit mode. And then here, you see that we can then select our point mode, and then our edge mode, and our face mode. So the point mode helps us to select the points on this object, edge mode helps us select the edges on this object, and the face mode helps us select the faces on this object. To switch in and out of the object and edit mode freely, just hit tab on your keyboard. So if I hit tab, I'm back to my object mode, and now you can't select the points or the edges or the faces, and then I can hit tab again to return to my edit mode. So the first tool we'll be looking at is our loop selection. Now a loop is a connection of points, edges, or faces that flow continuously. So it usually starts from point A and ends in point A again. Or sometimes where there's an interruption, it can start from point A and then end where it's interrupted. If you look around this object, you see that this edge flows continuously. So that means we can select the entire loop here with a loop selection tool. And if we look from this point here and we go down, you see that we can select to this point. So we can also select a loop selection here, but there will be an interruption because there's no edge that's connecting this to the other end. So to perform a loop selection on the edges, let's go to our edge mode first, and then hit Shift and Alt on your keyboard. You hold them together, then you left click around the edge you want, and that will select that loop. So we can keep doing this. I'll hold Shift and Alt, select this loop. We can select these loops, and select other loops here. So I'll click on an empty space to deselect this. So if I wanted to select this loop also, I'll hit Shift and Alt on my keyboard, then I will left click on this edge here, and you see now it is selected from this point to this point. Now when you make a loop selection, you can also perform some other actions to that loop selection. So here, as this loop is selected, I can now use my gizmo tool to move this, or I can hold G on my keyboard and I can just grab this and move it around. If I want to grab it on a particular axis, I can hit the axis after I've hit G. So now if I just hit X, you see that it will move it only on the X axis, and that will work also for other axes, Y and Z. So I'll drop this and undo that. So you can also scale this particular loop to change the shape of this object. So if I go to my scale tool here, and then I just click around this circle to select all axes, I can scale this loop together here. I see that adjusts the shape of this object. I can also scale on different axes, only on the X axis, and I can also scale only on the Y axis. Another way to scale this is you can hit S on your keyboard, and then you can just drag out or drag in to scale this out or inwards. So another thing we can do to this loop selection here is to slide it around the mesh. So if we currently move it, you see that it's affecting the shape. But if we wanted to just slide this along these other edges, what we need to do is to hit G twice on our keyboard. So if I hit G and then hit G again, it will bring the slide tool and I can just move up or downwards. I need to slide it around this particular edge we're seeing here. So we can also make a loop selection in our face mode. So I'll deselect this here and I'll go to our face mode. So let's select this loop here. So if I hit Shift Alt and I just come to this area and left click, it will select around this loop here. And I can also hit Shift Alt to select this loop here vertically. So another modeling tool we can use when we select our faces this way is to extrude these faces or insert the faces. So to insert these faces here, just hit I on your keyboard. And then once you hit I, it will give you these dotted lines. And if you drag inwards, it will insert those faces. And so I can left click to place that selection. Note that once you insert a face, you automatically create an edge loop around those faces you've just inserted. So you see here, I have new loops, and then I can perform other actions with this loop selection here. So if I wanted to perform an extrusion on this face, first of all, let's see how the extrusion tool works. Let's select a single face here. So if I hit E on my keyboard and I just drag outwards or inwards, you see that that's been extruded. But if I want to walk along these faces, so let's just make the loop selection again, Shift Alt and select this loop. If I hit E, it won't help me extrude this how I want to extrude it because I want this to grow. I want this to scale together outwards. So the way to do that is to extrude the faces along the normals. Now your normals has to do with the direction your polygons are facing. So if I right click here and click extrude faces along normals, so this way now if I just drag my mouse out or inwards, it will extrude these faces along those normals. So I can place this here and create that interesting detail. So you can keep inserting the faces. You hit I again, you can insert this, and then you can right click to extrude the faces outwards or inwards. Let's go back to the edge mode and demonstrate how we can bevel these edges. So if we wanted to make these corners round without subdividing this object or adding more divisions to this object, we can select this loop here and then use the bevel tool to create rounded edges. So I'll hold Shift Alt on my keyboard and then I'll select around this edge. Then to use the bevel tool, hit Ctrl B on your keyboard. It will give you this dotted line again. So if you drag your mouse out now, you see that to bevel those edges in this direction. And if you want to add more segments to make this round, just scroll on your mouse wheel upwards and you see it to start adding more subdivisions. Now if you wanted to create more loops by yourself, say you've already shaped a mesh and then you want to make more loop cuts by yourself, we can simply use the loop cut tool. So two ways we can do this. You can come over here and then you can hit this loop cut tool. Once you select it and go around your mesh, it will require you to place it at a starting position. And so if you left click here and then you drag without releasing your mouse, you drag this to this point, and then when you leave your mouse, that cut is made there. But another interesting way to make loop cuts is to hit Ctrl R on your keyboard. So if you hit Ctrl R on your keyboard and then you just go to where you want to start making your loop cut. Now the way this works is, first you can select how many cuts you want to make. So as this is still highlighted here first without clicking anything, if you scroll your mouse wheel up, you see to double the cut, and if you scroll it up again, it will keep increasing the cuts. This hasn't made the cuts. This is still us highlighting how many cuts we want to make and then where we want to place it. So if I scroll my mouse wheel down, it will reduce those cuts. So after selecting the number of cuts you want to make, for me I want to make 1. If you left click again, now your cut has still not been made. It's time for us to place this cut where we want to place it. Now I'm not clicking my mouse, I just left click once, and now I'm just dragging around this mesh here. So I can place this cut here by left clicking. Then now that is placed. So you can keep doing this. I'll hit Ctrl R again, I'll left click, and then I can drag this down here and then left click to place that. I can hit Ctrl R, left click down here. We'll be making a lot of loop cuts when we're modeling the product, so it will be good you rehearse this and then get familiar or comfortable with this tool. Another good thing to note when modeling is that when you use a tool on Blender, you can also adjust the settings from the properties. So let's go to our two properties here and keep this active. So let's practice this with our loop cut. So if I make a loop cut here and I just left click and then also left click again to drop it. If I go down here, I can bring this menu up and then I can adjust some settings. So if I increase the number of cuts here, you can see that affects the cut we just made. So you can go on to always check the settings here for whatever action you make. I'll just bring this down. If we go instead to our loop cut tool here, and so for this option, I'll need to determine the cuts I want to make before I make it on this object. So if I just drop this here, you see that it drops the number of cuts I selected here, 5 cuts. If I use our bevel tool, so let's just select this loop here. I'll hold Shift Alt and then click on this loop. Then I can go to my bevel tool here and then use the properties here, or I can just hit Ctrl B, and then the moment I left click to drop this, you see that my bevel options comes here, and then I can adjust what I just created again. The moment I do something else, this tool disappears. So it's more like a real-time update for the tools you are using. So if you want to just make loop cuts and you want to manually make your cuts, you want to slice this object freely, you can go over here to your knife, you place your mouse at your starting position, and then once you left click, you see now that you can move freely. And I'll place this cut here by left clicking, and I'll place another cut here. Then you can just keep cutting as you like. Then once you're done, you can right click and you can hit enter on your keyboard to make the cut. So note that as you've made this cut here, it means you've created unique sets of edges and faces. So if you go to our face mode now and let's go to our move tool, you see now that if you select this face, because of the cut we've made, you can now perform unique actions on these particular faces. So you can also insert the face here. If this is what you want to do, you can extrude this. You can do other things. So if you want to make multiple cuts in different areas with the knife tool, so if I go to my knife tool again, say I want to make this cut here, and I want to place this here, I don't want to continue it. So just right click it will place that cut here, then you can continue cutting from another area here by left clicking. Then you can right click again, then go to another area to continue cutting. Then once you're done, hit enter to make those cuts. A subdivision surface multiplies the edges or segments in your mesh with the intention to smoothen that mesh and make the edges round or curved. It works with the arrangement, position, and proximity of edges in that mesh to then smoothen the edges or make them round. So let's demonstrate using a subdivision surface with a cube. So I'll hit Shift A on my keyboard to bring a cube in. Under mesh, I'll select this cube here. Now to apply a subdivision surface to this cube, make sure you've selected the cube over here in your outliner. Then come over here to your modifier properties. Then under add modifier, select your subdivision surface over here. Now before we go ahead, I want to change this object shading from flat to smooth. So I'll right click on this object and then I'll just change shade here to smooth. And that will get rid of those rigid edges. Now what has happened is our object has now become round and smooth based on the arrangement of our edges. So first, if we want to make this smoother, we can just go over here and increase the levels here. So levels in our viewport, we can increase this to 2 and then we'll have a smoother object. So to understand what has happened here better, let's go to our edit mode. So as you can see, this is our original mesh, this cube, and inside is our subdivided mesh. So we'll see how actions we take on the cube here will affect the subdivided mesh. So one key thing to note is that the proximity and arrangement of your edge is very important. So if I go to our edge mode here and I just select this edge we have over here. So I'll bring my gizmo in to demonstrate this. So if I just drag this on the x-axis, you can see that the shape of our mesh begins to change. And why this looks like a ball is because we don't have supporting edges here to make these corners tighter. So if I make a loop cut here, I'll hit Ctrl R on my keyboard. Now, if I begin to move this cut, you can see how it takes effect on the subdivided mesh. So the closer it gets to another edge, the tighter that corner will become. And then the farther it is from the edges around it, the smoother or rounder it will become. So I can place this here. I can also place another cut here and you see that will make that tighter. I can also come here, place another cut here, and I can also place another cut here. So modeling this way is called the subdivision surface modeling technique. So I can also go to my face mode here. I can select this face on top. Then I'll hit I to insert the face this way. Then I'll just hit E to extrude that upwards this way. So here we can also add a loop cut here to make these corners tighter. And add another loop cut here to make these corners tighter. So you can keep shaping your mesh into what you want to shape it into. So two ways you can work with your subdivision surface is that you can work with it activated or you can work with it disabled. So currently it's activated in our viewport, but if you go over here and just disable it temporarily, you can shape your object maybe after a reference, and then once you're done, you can come over here and just enable it back, and then you see how that's taking effect. Now once you're done and you want to apply the subdivision surface, you want to make the smoothness apply to the original mesh. The first thing is to decide on the level of subdivision you want. So if you've been working with 2 in your viewport and that's what you want, make sure your render is also set at 2. But if you set your levels in the viewport to 1 and then your render is set at 2, when you apply it, your mesh should be subdivided by 2. So always make sure the number here is what you want your final mesh to be subdivided by. So you can set this to 2, and then once you are done, you can return to your object mode. I hit tab on my keyboard. Then you can come over here and then select apply. Now as you can see with this cube selected, you don't have any modifier. That means the subdivision surface has applied to the mesh. So if you go to our edit mode now, you see how that's taking effect. Thank you for joining this class. In the next class, we'll start modeling proper and we'll be learning how to transform cylindrical primitives into products. We'll be modeling these 4 products alongside their detailed covers. So ensure you subscribe, and remember you can support this initiative by grabbing the product reference bundle in the description below, and you can also support by getting a Vogbot NFT on OpenSea, where you also get a free animated fashion NFT for every piece bought. All this information can be found in the description below.